So, yeah, first, a pleasure to be here. It's my first time at this time in our workshop. What I've seen this morning is already great, so it's nice to see such a tight-knit community and a lot of exchange and communication, so it's great. So I'm happy to be here. And talk a bit about what we do at Bloomlife. So, well, conflict of interest, I'm the founder of Bloomlife, so clearly there is a positive conflict. I'll talk about what we believe in and why we created Bloomlife. I'll try to spend a couple of minutes on this, and then I picked one topic of research that we've been working on in the last 4 or 5 years now, focused really on labor detection, and so I'll try to speak a bit on how we use the product to generate data and use that data to find a biomarker and how we can validate the biomarker. So it's going to be one topic of the things we look at. Maybe just as an introductory slide, and this is perhaps a bit of a US perspective on the maternal health. I think it's true everywhere, it's true globally, but especially in the US, there is a growing maternal health crisis. And there are a couple of numbers that are really striking. It's been a recent survey by the Blue Cross Blue Shield, a large insurer in the US, that has shown that between 2014 and 2018, the number of high-risk pregnancies has increased by over 30%. So that's a huge increase in terms of the high-risk pregnancies. And with that, of course, an increase in problems outcomes. And it's shown that women with pregnancy complications will have are 2 times as likely to experience childbirth complication. That, of course, has an impact on cost. And in the US, yearly, the system spends $110 billion on maternal health care, and 60% of that I believe to be associated to high-risk pregnancy. So there is really it's 20% of pregnancies will drive 60% of the costs. It's definitely something that is a large issue. Something that is sometimes overlooked is that issues in pregnancies, health issues in pregnancies have a long-time impact. And it's been shown again that having pregnancy complications will have an increased risk of cardiovascular diseases down the road, and also an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So it's not only limited to pregnancy, far from there. It really has a long-lasting impact on the health of both the moms and the baby. Something which is very specific to the US, and it's a really growing problem, is what we call OBGYN deserts. So there are in the US 9,000 counties where there is not a single OBGYN. And that is a huge driver for the adoption of remote technologies, because for those women who do not have an OBGYN in their county, they have to travel 2 hours, 3 hours to go and see the doctor. Right? And so that really is an additional driver to everything else we know, but that's really a pressure that there is in the US to actually drive the adoption of remote technologies. Despite all of those trends, there clearly is a lack of innovation, and I think that's what drives us all here, is to change the status quo. It's been mentioned in the slide before, but that same old technologies, first introduced in the 1970s, what is used today in clinical practice. There is very little field in medicine where that's the case. And so I think that's why we all here, I think, that's what we're working towards, is to improve that. What's the issue today? Well, it's projects at the office using very old technologies. There is very little comprehensive risk screening, and I think we heard some work today about that. And there is limited use of digital tools. Some other space in medicine or fields in medicine have adopted digital technologies way faster than what we see in the obstetrics and gynecology. So again, there is a lack there. There's an example I always like to take is that, so there is old technology giving old data, but it really has real world consequences. And the one example that is really striking for me is the Friedman curve. So Friedman curve is what's used to evaluate labor progress. Still today, it's part of clinical practice. If you look at when this curve was first introduced, it was introduced by Friedman in 1955. So now we're talking, 70 years ago. And what's even very striking is to look at the data that was used to create that curve. It was a data that was, so the patient population was 500 women. They were all Caucasian. So someone talked about diversity or ethnicity before. This is based on all Caucasian women, and this is applied to everyone. 55% of them had forceps delivery, and 96 were sedated. And this is the data, the population that led to that curve that is used today as clinical practice for everyone. That's crazy, right? So that's an example where we have old data that made its way into clinical practice, and that has never been challenged. It's increasingly difficult to challenge because it is clinical. It is the guidelines. So how do you deviate from the guidelines to demonstrate that something else is better, right? And so what's the consequence of this? I think it's not only due to that. That would be an overstatement. But in the US, the rate of C-section is 31%. Which is twice as much as what the WHO recommends. Right? It's not all due to that, but there is clearly a part of that is responsible here, right? That's labor dystocia. A lot of the C-sections are due to labor dystocia, so that's labor does stop and starts again, and that will lead to a C-section. And this is all based again on the diagnosis of dystocia is based on that curve. And it will have an impact on the outcomes. So this situation really is what pushed us to found Bloomlife 7 years ago, and really based on three beliefs. The first belief is that we believe that we need better data, but we need to believe that better data will lead to radical improvements in interventions and outcomes. So we believe that really data is one of the solutions to drive better outcomes in pregnancy. We also believe that the future mom, should play a more important role in her pregnancy. Today it's a lot handled by the system, so to speak. We believe that we should empower her to make better decisions. We should empower her with, to choose a better lifestyle, all that based on that. And third, we believe that it should be accessible to everyone, not only some limited people in the world, but really global access to this type of increased quality care. So what do we do at Bloomlife? We developing a prenatal care platform that combines predictive devices and analytics to do three things: increase access to care, empower moms, and improve outcomes. That's in short, that's what we do. We try to deliver value to all stakeholders involved. The mom first, where we're trying to increase her peace of mind, give her greater control during her pregnancy, provide clear communication. We also want to deliver value to the doctors, save their time, allow early diagnosis, and better quality of care. And eventually also on the healthcare organization, we want to reduce complications, lower costs, and make sure that they have healthy members. From a scientific perspective, our goal is really to try to accelerate medical discovery by capturing data with the help of patients, with the help of our users, of the moms. And how do we do that? Was the framework behind that is when we started Bloomlife, we had the idea to develop a product that will provide peace of mind to mom, and that at the same time will help us collect data. Right? The issue is really data. There is very limited data. So how do we create a large data set? And the idea was, okay, well, let's do a consumer product, a product that can be used by mom, and with their permission, let's collect that data so that we can use it to seed new science, to seed medical discovery. And so that's the second step, the step of digital biomarker discovery. And then once we have that biomarker, then we need to validate it. That's a typical medical device innovation pathway where you need to get a proper certification, you need to get a proper validation, and eventually you need it to be implemented in clinical care flow. Right? So, but that's the idea. Is how can we use technology to actually accelerate innovation? So I'll just take one example, and so that's how we try to address the consumer need to crowdsource physiological data at a large scale. And so we started, when we started Bloomlife 7 years ago, we started with, as I said, consumer product. It was a product that is meant to track contractions, so it's nothing more, nothing less than a contraction counter, so to speak, but it's automated. So a little patch goes on the belly, will measure electrosonography, and will extract a simple count of contractions. So that's kind of what. So we launched it in 2017, and the feedback we got from moms first was really good, and I'm going to spare you those details. But we also did a small study where we looked at the fact that it did help mom in decreasing anxiety and increasing their feeling of control. So they felt more empowered by having access to that information that they had before. So that was something that was very, very positive in terms of the impact that digital technologies can have on moms. As we were commercializing this, we started aggregating a data set. And so the data set today is over 15,000 pregnancies and over 1 billion hours of longitudinal data. So that's a huge data set. Of course, it's extremely non-controlled. I think I heard multiple times it's different, what you have in the lab or what you have in the clinic. I can tell you that the home environment of a mom is the worst in terms of data quality. So there is a lot of data, but it is noisy data, right? But you have quantity, and you need to be able to process it to extract the relevant information. So what did we do with that data? So the first thing we did is try to understand the trends that we saw in the data. So we just did some early descriptive analytics to understand different features. So from the signals we got, we can extract the maternal heart rate, the maternal heart variability, and a bunch of EHG features. So we just looked at those different features and see how did they correlate, how did they change between the pregnancy status and the labor status. So the idea here is, can we use physiological data as a early indicator of incoming labor? So can we see early signs, early physiological changes that are associated with the onset of labor? And so we looked across the different physiological features to see which one were interesting. So that's work that we published in 2017. From there on, we identified a set of 12 features, And based on those 12 features, we bundle them into what we call a digital biomarker. So what's a digital biomarker? It's a linear combination of multiple features, right? So it's a set of features, both on the maternal side and the EHG side, that gives us a predictor of labor onset. And so this graph's a little bit complicated to read, but if you look at the x-axis, it's time to delivery. So 0 means is the week that she delivered. 1 is 1 week before delivery, so you need to read it backwards. So 0 is labor, and then before that you have the time to delivery. And the y-axis is the probability to deliver within 24 hours. So what we look here is that, do we see, based on our predictor, is there an increase in probability to deliver? And the light gray box is women who delivered within 24 hours. The dark gray box is the rest. So what we see here, that wasn't consumer data, so what we see here is that there is a difference, and it's not huge, but there is a difference between a mom who's going to deliver and a mom who's not going to deliver. So there is predictive power in this set of physiological features that could allow us to predict labor. So based on that, we took that, so again, we went from a large data set in the consumer space, extracted that biomarker, and then we designed a study to validate that biomarker. So now we go back to a control setting. We go into a hospital where the mom comes here. We actually did a longitudinal following, so they were monitored for 10 weeks. And then we basically measure through that and see if we can indeed validate that biomarker. So again, going very quickly through the details here, we end up having a population of 125 moms. You see the different characteristics here. We split the group into two, a training data set and a valid data set. So we retrain a model, same features, but we retrain the model of that data set, and then we validate it on the second part of the data set. And these are the results that we got. Especially the right part is on the validation data set. So we show a sensitivity and specificity of 80% and 93% in detecting labor. So it's detecting labor within 24 hours. You can see that's early onset of labor. That's a testing. That's a testing set. The training set is on the left. So how does this compare to, so there is publication about the accuracy of a clinical exam. A clinical exam has a sensitivity of 78%. So what it means is that we are in the same range of a clinical exam, although of course it's using digital technologies, it's using technologies from home. So it's possible with digital technologies and a digital biomarker to get to a level of accuracy performance which is similar to what's obtained today in a clinical setting. So that's kind of where we are with this work, and it's still early stage. There's still a lot more validation to do. We work with a lot of different partners and funding agencies to continue to push that work. And I think part of the reason why I'm here, I'd love to meet you all and see if there is anything we can do together as we move forward. And the goal, again, on the high level is really there are very big challenges in maternal and personal health. We cannot solve it alone for sure. I think we all need to work towards that, and we welcome collaboration to kind of move this forward. That, hopefully I made it in 10 minutes. Save a bit of time.
So thanks a lot, Julian. Okay, there is a question.
I'm a very big voice, so I don't know that.
Yep.
I'm Cassandra from Stony Brook in New York. So I think the intro to your work is really great too, especially in America where there's very large expanses of the country where there's not a lot of providers. But kind of going to the race and socioeconomic status of that, since it was a consumer product, did you have a good variety of socioeconomic status in your kind of original data set? And then to kind of my second question, how are you kind of pushing forward, trying to capture some of those lower socioeconomic groups and even racial groups, because the majority of your people in your study were Caucasian as well?
Yep. It's a great question. So it's a couple of questions in your question. So the first question is that, so where we could, we capture that information. Of course, in the US, you cannot ask, and it cannot be mandatory, it has to be voluntary. So we always have a survey that we ask for users, and so based on that, we could have that number of, so it was diverse. It was more like, let's say it was a good representation of the population, to put it that way. We had an over-representation of high risk, which was interesting. In the sense, which basically speaks to maybe the concern that some of the moms had. But from ethnicity and social determinants, it was a good representation. We worked with, you will know that this agency, with HRSA, to actually do exactly that. So we did a study, it was a small scale study, really focused on only minorities to see how technologies will be perceived by them and what the challenges that they had. So we've done also more focused work on those minorities because they do have different rights. It's really interesting what we learned from it, that there was a lot of barrier to communication with their providers just because of that. And so they saw technology as a way to facilitate communication with their care provider in a way more objective manner. Not just say, hey, I'm feeling contractions, but the fact that you could come with the app and say, no, I'm having contractions, I'm not feeling them, made them feel way more at ease to actually communicate with the provider. And so that's really interesting to see, I think, this type of
I think it's also interesting to look at different minorities and ethnic cultures to see what their kind of acceptance of different technologies are,
Yeah.
especially for maternal anxiety
Yeah.
and pain
Yeah.
feelings. So
Yeah.
very cool work. Thank you.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, good question.
Okay, and one question from me. Can you give a very brief update what you think was the impact of Corona on your activities?
I mean, I'm sure Renee or Nemo can speak that. It's been a huge accelerator for the adoption of remote technologies. I mean, that's been a huge difference. I mean, we've had clinics contacting us to use that for different applications. Like our product was really focused on contraction, but they wanted to use that to do a lot of different things. And so the pandemic has been a huge driver for a huge accelerator for adoption of those technologies, for sure. No question about that. Especially now these things. And something which is interesting is that some healthcare systems in the US have made structural change to accommodate for remote technologies. And those changes are there to stay. Because a lot of people have said, well, it's going to come, and then in 2 years, all get back to normal. Not at all. They have made systemic changes in their system, which shows that it's there to stay. And I think we see a lot of that.
Good
Yep.
to hear. Okay, so then thanks a lot for your interesting presentation, and then let's move over to the next speaker. I think we get